Have you ever wondered why a small piece of land in the Middle East manages to capture the world's attention, sparking conflicts that have echoed for millennia? Israel, a name that evokes passions, wars, and an ancestral fear. Prepare for a journey that goes beyond the headlines, diving into ancient promises, intertwined destinies, and the complex relationship between two nations forged under the vision of a single God. What you're about to discover isn't just history or politics. It's a revelation of prophecies unfolding before our very eyes, capable of changing your view of the future. Comment now. I want to understand the truth. The seed of this global conflict was planted long before nations like Israel or Iran even existed, with a man named Abram. In Genesis chapter 12, the Bible narrates God's divine promise to Abram, a great nation and a special land. However, Abram and his wife Sarah had no children. In their eagerness to fulfill the promise by their own means, Sarah offered her Egyptian servant Hagar to Abram. From this union, Ishmael was born, although God blessed him, promising to make him a great nation and to bring forth 12 princes from him. Ishmael was not the son of the main covenant promise. Years later, miraculously, when Abraham was 100 years old, Sarah conceived Isaac, the son who would carry the divine covenant. God was emphatic. It was with Isaac that the eternal covenant would be established. Here, the root of a rivalry that resonates to this day was cast. Ishmael, the firstborn, but not the heir of the spiritual promise, versus Isaac, God's chosen one to continue the lineage that would give rise to Israel. Genesis 16 prophesies about Ishmael. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. This intrinsic tension between the descendants of Ishmael, who will become the Arab peoples, and the descendants of Isaac, the people of Israel, transcended generations, transforming into a complex entanglement of conflicts between peoples, cultures, and beliefs. The essence of the problem lies not in borders or modern politics, but in a deep dispute over divine promises and ancestral identity. After Abraham's death, the paths of Ishmael and Isaac diverged. Isaac remained in the promised land of Canaan, and through his son Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel emerged. Ishmael, blessed with the promise of many descendants, fathered 12 Arab princes, whose clans spread across the vast desert of the Middle East, in regions that today include Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and parts of Iraq. Over time, these Ishmaelite tribes grew in number and influence. Despite their common roots with the Hebrews, they developed distinct cultures, tribal religions, and identities, often in opposition to the descendants of Isaac. The geographical separation, thus, also became a spiritual separation. While Isaac's lineage remained faithful to the covenant with the God of Israel, Ishmael's descendants followed other traditions, which were polytheistic, until the emergence of a new faith centuries later, Islam. This fundamental division, to whom the divine promise truly belongs, was never resolved. Centuries passed, and this tribal division evolved into the formation of empires. Isaac's descendants formed the kingdom of Israel, and Ishmael's, the powerful Arab peoples who would later unite under the banner of Islam. This ancient dispute over blessing, lineage, and identity will become the backdrop for the great religious, political, and territorial wars that would mark the entire history of the Middle East. In the year 570 AD, a man named Muhammad was born in Mecca from the tribe of the Quraysh, considered a descendant of Ishmael. At the age of 40, Muhammad claimed to have received revelations from the angel Gabriel, proclaiming the existence of one true God, whom he called Allah. Muhammad began to preach monotheism, positioning himself as the last prophet in the lineage of Abraham, succeeding Moses and Jesus. His ideas, which condemned idolatry and taught submission to the will of God, Islam, caused great conflict in Mecca. This led Muhammad to flee to Medina in 622 AD, an event known as a Hijra, which marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. In Medina, he gained followers, formed an army, and later returned to Mecca as a conqueror. After his death, the caliphs expanded Islam. In less than a century, the Islamic Empire dominated vast regions, transforming the political and spiritual map of the Middle East. With this new faith came a new narrative about Abraham's heritage. Muslims asserted that Ishmael, not Isaac, was the true son of the promise. This theological difference would become the heart of the conflict with Israel. For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people were dispersed, but they never lost their identity or their faith in the promise of return. In the 19th century, the Zionist movement gained strength to rebuild the state of Israel, propelled forward after the Holocaust. In 1947, the UN approved the partition of Palestine into 2 states. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the birth of the State of Israel. For the first time in 2 millennia, the Jews had a national home. The next day, 5 Arab nations invaded Israel. Against all predictions, Israel won, expanding its territory. For the Jews, it was a miracle. For the Arabs, a catastrophe, resulting in hundreds of thousands of Palestinian refugees. Muslim countries never accepted the rebirth of Israel. Thus, the ancient conflict between the sons of Ishmael and Isaac was reborn as modern warfare. It was not merely a spiritual dispute, but a battle for territory and survival. After 1948, the Arab world viewed Israel as a threat. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel was surrounded by Arab nations and, in just 6 days, defeated its enemies and conquered strategic territories, including East Jerusalem. This victory intensified hatred, and Palestinian frustration led to revolt. Armed groups like the PLO emerged, and the struggle became guerrilla warfare, bombings, and attacks on civilians. Terrorism spread, and Israel responded with stricter security policies. The Middle East became a powder keg, and the conflict a global symbol of division. Before becoming Israel's greatest enemy, Iran, ancient Persia, was an ally of the U.S., Israel, and Iran had commercial and diplomatic ties. However, the predominantly Shiite Iranian people viewed Westernization with distrust. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution, led by Ayatollah Khomeini, overthrew the Shah and transformed Iran into a theocratic Islamic republic. One of its first measures was to break with Israel, calling it the Little Satan. Iran's revolutionary ideology aimed to liberate oppressed peoples, and Israel was seen as a primary obstacle. Starting in the 1980s, Iran began funding armed anti-Israel groups, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hamas in Gaza. The war against Israel became spiritual. While Iran develops its nuclear program, Iranian leaders publicly declare that Israel must be destroyed. The former ally has become an existential threat. The Iranian regime, led by Shiite clerics, views the destruction of Israel as part of its mission to expand the values of the Islamic Revolution. Iran funds and arms groups against Israel, which launch missiles and spread propaganda. Iranian doctrine predicts that, to hasten the coming of the Mahdi, the Shiite Messiah, instability is necessary, especially in Jerusalem. This apocalyptic dimension gives the struggle against Israel the character of a holy war. Without directly confronting Israel, Iran adopted an indirect strategy, funding, arming, and training militias and extremist groups on Israel's borders, known as the Axis of Resistance. Hezbollah and Hamas receive Iranian support, united by the goal of destroying Israel. These groups use civilians as shields, forcing Israel to respond and reinforcing the narrative of Zionist aggression. Iran also operates in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, spreading Shiite militias to encircle Israel with a constant threat. In addition to military support, Iran maintains propaganda
Resoluções internacionais, a tensão persiste.
ideology. In recent decades, Israel and Iran have been engaged in an undeclared war of espionage,
Babilônios,
sabotage, and cyber
Séculos
attacks.
depois,
Israel
Roma
considers the Iranian nuclear program an existential threat and acts preemptively. Iran responds with indirect attacks and threats. The risk of open warfare grows annually. Israel conducts constant airstrikes in Syria, destroying Iranian weapon convoys destined for Hezbollah. This Cold War has become the backdrop for the entire modern Middle East, a dispute between a westernized democracy and an Islamic theocracy. The Bible not only narrates Israel's past, it anticipates its future. Millennia-old prophecies speak of wars involving Israel in the last days, coinciding with the current scenario. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, we read about an invasion led by Gog from the land of Magog against Israel. This coalition includes ancient Persia, today Iran, among other nations. The prophecy states that these nations will invade Israel in times of apparent peace, but God will supernaturally intervene. Isaiah 17 prophesies against Damascus. It will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins. In Revelation 16, the Battle of Armageddon is described as the final confrontation in Israel. Zechariah 12 verse 1 says that all nations will gather against Jerusalem, but God will fight for his people. The Mount of Olives will split, and the Messiah will reign over the earth. For many scholars, what we see today in the Middle East, the encirclement of Israel, the hatred of nations, the nuclear tension, is the harbinger of prophetic fulfillment. The end may not be far off. In June 2025, the world witnesses the escalation of conflict that many fear could be the beginning of a regional or even global war. Israel and Iran have exchanged direct, large-scale attacks. Israel defends its right to exist, while Iran calls for a total jihad. The war has ceased to be bilateral and has transformed into a multinational siege against Israel. The world watches apprehensively, with financial markets fluctuating and oil prices soaring. Israel and Iran, two ancient enemies, are closer to total confrontation than ever before. In the face of the current chaos, many wonder, what comes next? The Bible offers a clear vision of the end, pointing to Israel, Jerusalem, and a time of global tribulation. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, the invasion against Israel is defeated by God himself. Many believe this attack could occur after an apparent peace. Revelation 16 speaks of the final battle, Armageddon. Zechariah 14 describes the Lord descending upon the Mount of Olives. Daniel warns a global leader who will make a peace treaty with Israel for 7 years, but will break this pact halfway through, initiating the Great Tribulation. Are we approaching this scenario? Many scholars believe so. The advancement of artificial intelligence, the centralization of governments, the increase in conflicts, the persecution of Christians, and the nuclear threat in the Middle East are all signs. But there is hope. The Bible affirms that, in the end, Jesus Christ will return. He will reign in Jerusalem, restore all things, and judge the nations. Every eye will see him, and every knee will bow. Those who await him will have nothing to fear. What is happening today is not merely politics or war. It is a fulfillment of the Scriptures. The future has already begun, and the most important decision is still spiritual. The current war between Israel and Iran may seem like just another chapter, but for those who know the Scriptures, the signs are clear. The prophesied time is drawing near, and what is to come could change the course of the world forever. The Bible speaks of a time when Israel will be surrounded by enemies. Ezekiel 38 and 39 announce an invasion from the north, led by Gog, with the support of Persia. Before this, a false peace may emerge. Daniel 9 verse 27 states that a leader will make an alliance with many for 7 years, which will be broken after 3.5 years. This leader, the Antichrist, will turn against Israel and demand global worship. Then the Great Tribulation will begin, with global persecution of Jews and Christians. At the end of these 7 years, the nations of the world will march against Jerusalem in the Battle of Armageddon. The world will seem on the brink of total destruction, but then the heavens will open. Jesus Christ will return, visible and glorious, with the celestial armies. He will destroy the forces of evil with the breath of his mouth, and establish his millennial kingdom on earth. 1,000 years of peace, justice, and truth. The throne will be in Jerusalem, and every tear will be wiped away. You just heard truths that many ignore, revelations that are not in the news, but are in the scriptures. The prophetic clock is advancing. Israel is at the center. Nations are moving, and the return of Christ is closer than ever. If this message touched your heart, subscribe to this channel. Share it with those who need to understand the times we live in. Comment now, I believe in the return of Christ, because the more people hear, the more will awaken. And to those who remain faithful to the end, the crown of life will be given, as Revelation 2 verse 10 tells us.